Welcome to the Abundance Hack Show, Season 4, where we are focusing on mastery. The last 3 seasons, I gave you the information. Now, we're focusing on integrating it into our lives and embodying it. If you are ready to master your thoughts, emotions, and patterns to feel whole, fulfilled, and really grounded in who you are without dimming your shine so you can live the abundant life that you truly desire, then you are in the right place. Hey M&Ms, thank you for tuning in to the Abundance Hack Show. What are you manifesting in your life today? If you're joining me for the first time, although M&Ms are really yummy candies, it actually stands for magical manifestors. And today we're going to be talking about going from existing to living. And today's guest is Jovan. I'm so excited to chat with him. But before we dive into who he is and what he does, Jovan, I want to ask you, what does abundance mean to you?
It's a strong question right out of the gate. Abundance to me is fulfillment, right? It is the idea of being whole and complete, not lacking anything, right? It is alignment externally and internally, meaning that what I do on a day-to-day basis is connected to who I am. It's when potential meets position, right? And so I believe that that's kind of my first take of the word abundance, but such a powerful word.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So I just feel like everything that you do just speaks to everything you just said. So I love that so much. So Jovan is a professional motivational speaker and leadership coach. And I came across a video that stopped me in my tracks. And I'm like, who is this person? I have to have him on the show. So I'm actually going to insert that clip here.
Hey, check this out. Don't allow people to dilute you simply because they can't digest you. Come on. You see, in this life, people are going to try to dilute what they can't digest. And here are 3 reasons as to why people may try to dilute you. Number 1, they don't understand your significance. Number 2, they don't appreciate your uniqueness. Or number 3, they're intimidated by your presence. But irregardless of the reason, you can't allow people to dilute you because they can't digest you. Or let me say it a different way, you can't compromise who you are to make somebody else feel more comfortable about being where they are. Come on. You see, because when you compromise who you are to help somebody to feel more comfortable about where they are, you both lose. Because you end up establishing a relationship that's built on lies.
Tell us about you. Who is Jovan and how did you get started with the work that you do?
Sure. So professionally, I guess I'm coined a motivational speaker, leadership coach, author, and really a social entrepreneur. But at the core, I'm really just a man with a heart to make a difference in our world. I believe that we should not sacrifice or compromise our vitality or integrity or fulfillment for the cost of achievement, right? And so it's really important for me to help others to really understand the notion of achieving more and compromising less. And a lot of that really, was birthed from the loss of my father. So a little bit of share more probably later in this podcast. I lost my dad to cancer, and it was a life-altering moment for my family and I. And at first, I wish I went down the road of purpose and using that pain for something that was going to be prosperous. But the truth is, I allowed so many other things to fill that void, right? And that took me down the road of obviously alcoholism and different things that were really tied to that. But I just remember this moment as being probably the darkest place in my life. I remember something my dad taught me that was really instrumental, and it came back full circle in my darkest moment. And all this time, I realized that my father died, but my purpose didn't. Right. And so that really kind of ignited a fire in me to help people, not just to use their barrenness for breakthrough or their pain for purpose or their obstacles for opportunities, but to do it in such a way that they don't compromise what's most important. I think we sometimes confuse sacrifice for self-sabotage. You hear it all the time. To be successful, you have to sacrifice. But I think there's a thin line between sacrifice and self-sabotage. So that's really my mission, man. It's my heart, my purpose. It's what I do every single day. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity, whether it's a room of 5 people or 5,000. It's a blessing nonetheless,
Let me just say, there is so much I want to unpack with what you just said. And I think that we use purpose almost as an excuse to go down that path of burnout, self-sabotage, and we're programmed to feel like we have to do that. We have to do it, and we give up who we are. And the reason why your video stuck out so much to me is because on my path to being who I am, I was told I had to be more relatable, I had to be more approachable, I had to be this way. And so that caused me to shift who I was and tone down my natural light and my natural energy for the comfort of others, to be able to be successful, because I was told that's what I had to do to be successful. So we're programmed to sacrifice who we truly are in our natural light because of that.
100%. And it's the concept of allowing people to dilute you because they can't digest you. And we all fall into that trap. And I think it's easier to fall into the trap when, to some degree, you already struggle with your own identity. Here's the truth: for most of us, we go through life as we're pursuing purpose, we're really having to embrace the fullness of who we are. Like, for me to really walk in my purpose, I have to fully embrace who I am, who I was created to be. And sometimes along the quest of, really figuring out who you are, you end up running into the voices and opinions of broken people who have broken lens. And so what they see in you, or when they see you through the brokenness of their lens. And they then attempt to adjust you based on their definition of who you should be. Let me simplify it this way. I envision it like people like wearing glasses, and these lens of this glasses has been smashed over the years. They're not totally broken, but they smashed a bit, and they're smashed by people disappointing them. They're smashed by trauma. They're smashed by all these different things that they go through. And people walk around with these glasses on. And so anything that they see through the lens of these broken glasses, they see the brokenness in. And so now they attempt to try to, dilute you, derail you, disempower you, or sometimes enable you, because it's what they see based on their experiences. So I think it's so important along that journey to really have that perspective too.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of it is subconscious. I don't think that people even realize that they're doing it. So, what are some key ways people can identify that they have a lens, that like a broken lens, where they're seeing people through it? Because I think that one of the biggest things that I want to focus on this podcast is like just having awareness around when this is being done to us and when we're doing it to others, because sometimes people don't even know because it's subconscious.
I love that. I think the biggest thing too, so maybe it's a twofold kind of answer. I think the biggest thing to be able to identify if you are doing it to others, right? It is really a matter of, how can I put this? Patterns, right? A lot of times we realize that, man, all of my relationships tend to have this thing in common, or all of my connections tend to end this way, or at some point I tend to sabotage things in a certain nature. And at first we attempt to kind of blame other people because it allows us to, not necessarily confront ourselves, which is one of the hardest things to do. And in blaming others, we shift the blame from ourselves. We don't take ownership. We make excuses, right? And if you continue to see kind of those patterns of what we call cycles, right? And those cycles obviously are happening maybe every couple of years, every couple of months, it is time for you to kind of sit back and evaluate, hey, maybe what I'm attracting in my life is a reflection of who I am. Because I really believe that we attract who we are, not just what we do. And so what I tend to do a lot is when I look at relationships or situations or circumstances in my life and they seem to be, broken or whatever the case may be, I always try to go in front of a mirror and I try to identify what it is in me that is attracting those types of people or those types of scenarios. So I think the first thing is really patterns. I think it's important to be honest, and really it's a level of humility to say it can't be everybody else, right? At some point I got to take some ownership to it. And we can talk about really the other end of it, where I think the second fold of the question was like, how do you know when you're doing it to others, and how do you know when it's being done to you, right? We tend to get very comfortable with expressing to people that we have insecurities, right? If I ask most people, do you have insecurities? They're like, absolutely, everybody does. And it's our need, or really the way we normalize insecurities, like it should be a thing, that actually, let me go deep. Insecurities are a plot on our identity, right? I believe that my definition for insecurity is this: an insecurity is a repetition of a broken perspective that you've allowed to become your reality. Okay. A broken perspective that you allowed to become your reality. And so when we tolerate insecurities in our life, and we don't look at insecurities as abnormal, right? Feeling that there's something wrong with me, and because there's something wrong with me, then I have to adjust who I am. Then we continue down this path of sitting in the space of insecurities, and that is infiltrating and really killing our true identity. So here's where I'm going with all of this. One of the ways I believe you can really identify if it's being done to you is identify the relationships and the situations and the circumstances that cause you to feel insecure, inadequate, all these different proponents. And I think a huge part of that too is really introspection, right? Is really that level of solitude. So I don't want to go too deep too quick, but those are some of the thoughts that I have initially on that.
No, let's go deep. Like, don't hold back. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I love that. A broken perspective you've allowed to become your reality. And that is the thing that keeps us in those patterns, repeating the same pattern over and over and over. Different person, same situation. So yeah, go deep. I mean, I think that, okay, so I'm going to back it up just a little bit, because I feel like there's going to be people that listen that it may, like, just in case this goes over someone's head, if someone isn't aware of patterns, what's a way that they can start to realize that they are repeating patterns over? So we're going to start at the very beginning.
So practically, I think we underestimate and sometimes diminish the power of journaling.
Yes.
I think it's something that we can tend to think is not as powerful or as profound. Sometimes we want all these complicated scientific approaches to development, and we don't understand that power is simplicity, right? That significance is simplicity. I believe that journaling allows us to silence the external distractions and magnify the internal voice of destiny, right? Your heart is speaking to you. And sometimes the voice of our heart can be drowned out because we are moving, we have expectations, and we don't spend that time in solitude, not isolation, but solitude, to really be intentional about really finding out where you are. We talk so much about where we want to go, but if you talk about where you want to go without understanding where you are, it's like putting in the GPS your destination, but taking out your current location. It can't compute. And so journaling, I think, is one of the practical ways to really identify patterns, and it has to be done over a sustainable time. You can't really evaluate where you are if you're not journaling, I think, for at least 21 days consistently, right? And then really going back through that journal, and don't do what a lot of us do in life. Don't allow your representative to write in your journal. Here's what I mean by that. The representative in our lives is the person that we hire to show other people a version of us that we want them to see, right? And we move around in life with representatives in our relationship, in our job. And so there's versions of us. So when we get into having a conversation with ourselves, we're having a conversation with that representative, and we never really get to the core of who we really are and how we really feel. So that journal time is really time to be super honest and authentic about where you are, how you feel, embracing your flaws and your fallacies and maybe even your failures, because we can't run from that. Like, true transformation begins with transparency. And so I think really journaling over a 21-day period, and then spending some time to go back through those notes and see the pattern of your voice and your tone and your feelings and your emotions, that will begin to give you a level of truth. And it's truth that helps us to find freedom.
I absolutely love that you said journaling because I'm a huge, huge advocate for journaling. I have a meditation studio and I actually created these classes where, well, I shouldn't say classes, sessions where it's half journaling and half sound bath. And it was the least popular class because so many people avoid journaling, but it is so powerful. It is so powerful. So I'm like, okay, let me ease people into it, and I have been trying to preach journaling to so many people because I know the power in it, and especially with sound healing it helps you access your subconscious. So I think the reason why people don't journal is because they don't really want to face what is going on inside, but that's the only way you're going to identify your patterns and overcome them. So I'm so glad that you said that. And what you said about the representative, I feel like we're programmed to have that representative, especially with social media.
Mm.
And that is actually sacrificing who we truly are because we're not being self loyal and showing who we truly are. We're showing our representative, but we're programmed to do that. So, how do we stop the programming and really show up who we actually are?
I think the biggest battle that we face on a day-to-day basis is really that specific battle, the battle of who am I, right? Who am I? And the truth is, for most of us, we have what's called core beliefs. Your core beliefs are the way you view the world, yourself, and others. And your core beliefs are really just a byproduct of three things: your experiences, your exposure, and your environment. So what you've been experiencing, or what you have experienced, what you've been exposed to, and the environment then creates a certain perception. And that perception drives your actions or inactions. That creates your reality. And then your reality creates your core belief, which, i.e., is the answer to the question of who am I? And so if we are not intentional about understanding, first of all, we have to understand that the question of who am I is not an affirmation or title. Like if you ask most people that, they say, well, I'm beautiful, I'm strong, I'm more than enough, or I'm a mother, I'm a father. We define ourselves by just titles or affirmations, but those are only two aspects of who you are, right? The first one is your beliefs. The second one is your environment. The third one is your affirmations. The fourth one is your relationships. And the fifth one is your contribution. So let me say it again. It's your beliefs, your affirmations, your environment, your relationships, and your contributions. These are the things that really define who you are. So what am I saying? Answering the question of who you are isn't so much a posture, it's a position. It's where you are aligned in those five pieces. And if we're not intentional about aligning our beliefs with our affirmations, with our environment, with our relationships, and with our contribution, then we're being defined by society, by social media, by circumstance. It's a long-winded way of saying that we have to be intentional about identity, because if you don't define who you are, then the world will define you. And so those five proponents, I think, are really, really important, and they need to be aligned, because the difference between somebody who says who they are versus somebody who believes it is really alignment to these five. I'm gonna say it one more time. Your beliefs are the foundation to everything. So if you believe you're a person of value, of purpose, right? Your affirmations then say, how are you affirming those beliefs? Through education. So maybe you're a person who wants to make an impact in a certain space. Your affirmation should now allow you to become an apprentice and a student to that, that charge. And then the third one is your environment. Is your environment conducive to being a purpose-driven person? And then the fourth one, which most of us struggle, is the relationships. Do your relationships complement you, or are they competing against you? That's really, really important. And then the fifth one is your contribution. Are you contributing in a way that shows the significance, that shows you your significance as it relates to your beliefs? So there are really five proponents that have to be in play, understanding that who you are is now a byproduct of how those five pieces are aligned. It's not just so much what you say, but it's where you are.
I absolutely love that. And it reminds me a lot of the work that I did. I did a certification through Brene Brown, her Dare
Mm,
to Lead certification. And
mm,
one of the first things that she does is have people identify their values. And I've been talking about that a lot. So I feel like yours went even deeper than
mm.
just the values. So I absolutely love that. I I want to talk about sacrificing or compromising less to achieve what we truly desire. So I this is a two-part question. I love to know something that you felt or you've sacrificed in the past and realized you were sacrificing for the sake of achievement personally, and then something that you see often in the people that you work with.
Sure. The first thing for me is that I sacrificed my mental wellness for the pursuit of my purpose. What I realize is that there's a thin line between who you are and what you do. And sometimes the truth is, for most of us, we can become what we do. And when we become what we do, we are derailed by how, when it doesn't go so well, we don't feel so well. When it goes great, we feel great. And so what happened is that I felt as though I had this responsibility to show up every single time being the motivational speaker, the leadership coach. And so things like going on a bike ride or jumping on a scooter to go downtown, to me seems like I was wasting my time from being able to impact the world, having this global mission. That broken perspective that the only way to be successful in that space was to sacrifice everything, even myself, was one that was really built out of an attempt to fill a void. So when my dad died, I developed this heart of wanting to make an impact in people's lives. Great pursuit, wrong motive, right? And so a lot of the times, my mentor once told me that, Jovan, you're probably one of the most driven people that I've ever met, like the most driven person I know. And I was humbled by that because it was somebody super successful in my life. But I had to be honest, my friend, I was driven from something, not to something. So even though it looked like drive, I was really running from the fear of, man, life is short and I got to do everything I can to empty out my tank before my time comes, versus running to purpose and knowing that, man, I still have a purpose, a calling, I still have a destiny. And yes, this is something that happened to me, but it is not me. And really being able to really grasp and be humble enough to say, wow, what I used to position as sacrifice, because you hear as a motivational speaker, people say it all the time, get up, run, don't sleep, all that. I'm like, that's crazy. But it was my definition for success. And that's why I always challenge everybody, make sure that you define success for you. Because a lot of us live our lives pursuing somebody else's definition of success. So we're really living somebody else's life. And I think that is the absolute worst life to live, as a half-lived one. And so that was the biggest thing, is my mental wellness, my mental fulfillment. I wasn't prioritizing and valuing myself. Here was speaking about living the best life and doing all these things, but I was doing it from an empty place. And so I had to come to this realization that, man, the only way to accomplish this mission is to grasp this mentality that, Jovan, it's not about doing, it's about being. And the more I focused on being, or put my focus on being, is the more I was able to accomplish authentically. From a client perspective, or anybody that I work with, I think one of the things that people sacrifice the most, to be honest with you, it is their destiny. And it's a scary thing for me, and it's sad. And they usually sacrifice their destiny because of something that I call self-punishment. Okay. You tell me I can go deep, so we're gonna go there. We are humans, so we make mistakes. When we make mistakes, we sometimes deal with guilt. Guilt says I made a mistake. If we're not careful, then guilt goes to shame. Shame says I am a mistake. Self-punishment is where most of us reside. We then say, because I did something wrong and I am something wrong, then I deserve to be where I'm at, or should accept what I'm dealt because of what I did and because of who I am. And so we end up punishing ourselves from a moment or from an issue or from an experience. And we constantly perpetuate that cycle because dysfunction has become our normal. And so we exist in this state of dysfunction for so long, and we're conflicted because our spirit internally wants purpose, wants prosperity, wants fulfillment, wants to keep going, wants to serve. But then here comes obviously the other side of that, where we feel disqualified because of how we think about ourselves, thinking that because I did this, then I can't do that. But I'm always challenging people to understand that the reason you know now what you know now is because of what you did then. And so the idea of punishing yourself today for what happened yesterday is in itself kind of reactive, is in itself a bit disempowering. And this is why, my friend, because to step into your power, you have to embrace yourself. And embrace means that I got to embrace where I am, how I got there, who I am, what's been standing in my way, where I'm going, how I'm going to connect, and how I'm going to execute. You have to embrace the full picture in order to evolve that picture into being who it is that you're created to be. So those are the two pieces I think really, really important in answering that question, is that I sacrificed my mental wellness because even though my act was right, my motive was wrong. And on the other hand, I think a lot of people struggle with a form of self-punishment. So you punish yourself so much you can't clearly see who you are. And so you can't grab the mantle that sometimes doesn't look like where you are, right?
Oh my goodness. M&Ms, go back and listen to that again, because there's so much power there. So I totally resonate and relate. Even for me, this is something I talk about a lot, how we attach our self-worth to what we do, our purpose, our business, our success. And if I had to sit with this for a couple of years ago, I sat with this and I'm like, my identity, my self-worth is wrapped up in who I am, my business. If I decided to take a year or 2 or 3 off to have a child and I'm not doing business, if I stop doing my podcast, if I'm not working or being successful or inspiring people, who would I be then? So that's when I started thinking about like how much I attach my self-worth to how I show up in a world and the impact that I'm making. And going from doing to being is so freaking powerful. It's so powerful. And this is why I'm so passionate about this podcast and the work that I do with chakras, like really healing that solar plexus. Our self-worth is sits in our solar plexus. So really healing that on a deep level. It's sometimes really uncomfortable because we have to face all of our parts. Like we have to face even our fragmented parts. So what you said about the self-blame, like navigating the shame and the guilt, what happens, I don't know if you've heard of fragmentation, but it's a term where parts of you become broken off because of a traumatic situation, and we suppress and deny those parts of us, and then we wonder why we don't feel whole. So it's really embracing and accepting those fragmented parts, even the parts that we've hidden because we feel they make us unlovable, really embracing those parts so we are a whole individual. And that work, again, uncomfortable, but so freaking powerful. I love it. I love it.
So good. And to even add to that, until we embrace that, we can't be fulfilled, because what we end up doing is most of us, we are now look for others to embrace the part of us that we continue to kind of push away, and then we continue to kind of suppress. So I think it's so important, this concept of embrace, because that's what love is. Love is embrace, you know, and so that's good.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Dear divine being, remember your power. They will program you to forget, manipulate, and control you with guilt, shame, and fear. It is time to remember your power. Remember your worth. Connect to your purpose. Connect to your intuition. The answers are already within. Remember. As you look for the magic, remember you are the magic. Okay, so if you had to give someone a overall explanation of how to go from existing to living, what would you say? If someone said, how do I do that? How do I go from existing to living?
Oh, that's a strong question. The beginning of every journey is really clarity, right? Clarity is the beginning of everything that we're going to do. I have a formula that everything I'm doing walks through these 4 steps. That clarity gives you confidence. Confidence is what gives you influence, and influence is how you make an impact. That is clarity, confidence, influence, impact. But in each phase or each step, there are different phases. And so the beginning piece of it is really awareness. And so coming back to the beginning of our conversation, we talked about things like journaling and introspection and really spending that time to ask yourself. We don't ask ourselves powerful questions, so we don't get powerful answers. We don't demand of life powerful questions. We ask life these surface level questions, but expect profound answers, right? And so it's in asking the powerful questions that we begin to get the powerful answers. And that's how we grow in our awareness. And awareness is such a powerful thing. I believe is the epitome of any transformational journey, but it requires transparency, right? When you know where you are, regardless of how you feel about it, when you really know where you are and you begin to uncover how you got there, right? That's really important too. And then you start to go on this journey of understanding who you are. That's where it begins, because there's usually a disconnect between where you are and who you are. Or say it this way, there's a disconnect between your position and your potential. And what we end up doing sometimes most when we get that gap between position and potential is usually where frustration settles, right? And the greater the gap, the greater the frustration. In my book, I have a quote that says, frustration can be the birthplace of depression or the catalyst for transformation. Your outcome is based solely on your decision. Say it again. Frustration can be the birthplace of depression, or it could be the catalyst for transformation. Your outcome is based solely on your decision. So here's where we go with the answer to Jovan. How do I go from existing to living? It starts with a decision. And when I talk about a decision, it's not a decision to just, hey, pursue your goals and your dreams. Yeah, that's cool. That's a byproduct of this first decision, is to make a commitment to wholeness. To make a commitment to wholeness. We spend a lot of our lives chasing happiness. I think that's partially a problem, because when you think about what happiness is, it's a possession, a position, or level of prominence. It's a thing, right? And there's another line I have that says, what you chase will always run from you, but what you pursue will find you. So when we begin to chase happiness, there's always a bigger house, a bigger position, a nicer car. And we never really become fulfilled. So I say, don't go to chase happiness, pursue fulfillment, which is whole and complete, not lacking anything. And interesting, when we make a commitment to wholeness, the things that we were chasing begin to chase us, but they don't define us. And that's really, really important, right? And so it's a commitment. It starts with a decision to commit. Now, the word commitment is one that we don't truly understand. My definition is true commitment is the absence of options, okay? True commitment is the absence of options. It means when I make a decision to commit to wholeness, There's no other option in my life but to be whole and complete, not lacking anything. So I'm going to go down the road of addressing my trauma. I'm going to set up the boundaries that need to be in my life. I'm going to truly make a decision to better myself, whether it's eating better, whether it's getting out and doing some physical activity, whatever the case may be, because we know the areas of our life that we need to address. We just struggle to address them because they've become our normal, and we don't want to change our norm. But I think it really gets down to a commitment to wholeness. So practically, I think some ways that you can really do this. First and foremost, I think we don't read enough. We underestimate the power of reading and really stretching our minds. We're very much committed to staying in dysfunctional relationships and circles. We are comfortable being around people who are where we were, and we become very uncomfortable being in rooms where we're the smallest. The best room to be in is the room that you feel the most inadequate to some degree. Not inadequate from that standpoint, but really just feeling like, man, there's a lot I need to learn. There's a lot I need to grow. And you got to challenge your norm. When you think about it, normal is only normal because it's what the majority says or does. So is normal right? Is your normal right? And if your normal is not fueling your wholeness, then you might want to address that, right? So there's so many things we can do, but the truth is when we start with just the simplicity of understanding where we are, journaling, falling in love with ourselves, man. Sometimes we're not intimate with ourselves and we want to be intimate with others. You can't expect somebody to give to you what you can't give to you because you don't even know who you are. So that level of intimacy with self allows you to really understand and grow in your awareness. And awareness, I believe, is where it starts. This commitment to wholeness is where you go from existing to living.
Oh my goodness. So let me just tell you, M&Ms, I have myself muted because I'm in a back like, yes, I'm snapping. So I had to mute myself because I know I get carried away. And I wanted you to hear every powerful thing he just said. I mean, there is literally so much gold in that. Go back and listen to this episode again, probably 2 or 3 times, because there's so much gold. You may pick up on something else listening to it a second or third time. So I love how you said, challenge your norm. How are you challenging your normal? And if you're not placing yourself in situations where people are doing better than you, and I don't want to say better than you as a competitive thing, but putting yourself in situations where people are doing things beyond what you feel like is a reality, because that is going to expand, expanders. That's what I call it. Placing yourself around expanders, people that help you expand your reality of what is possible. If you're around people that are only doing this, then you think that this is only possible. But then when you expand, when you place yourself around people who are doing something beyond what you think is possible for you, it helps you gain the clarity and vision of how you can achieve that. And I'll give you a quick example. So my first time traveling internationally, I went to Costa Rica. No one around me had ever traveled internationally. And they're like, you're leaving the country alone? Why? And I'm like, why not? I went to an aerial and yoga retreat, and it was, I think, 5 days. And I thought I was hot shit. I'm like, I'm leaving the country 5 days. Like, I thought I was hot shit because no one around me had ever left the country, right? I get there and there's women that were traveling for a full month. One woman was traveling for 3 months, and I didn't even know that was a thing. So placing yourself in situations where you can expand your mind. So how can you challenge your norm? Who can you put yourself around that's an expander? Because it will help you just go from just existing and taking in what life hands you, rather than setting that intention to be whole. And I love what you said about falling in love with yourself. So in order to fall in love with yourself, you have to be whole. And in order to be whole, you have to acknowledge those parts that you've suppressed or denied or hidden because you think that they make you unlovable. So getting to know yourself, reading, journaling, this is how you start to do that. So because you mentioned books, I want to know, what is the name of your book? And if you have a different book recommendation of, like, if someone's like, okay, I'm pumped up, I'm going to read, what's the name of your book? And what is like your top, like, go-to must read book?
Sure. So my book is called Take Back Your Power. It's on Amazon and different networks. I also have an actual children's book that I wrote for my daughter. It's called Kyla. Yeah, Kyla Finds Her Identity. I wanted to always leave my daughter a message or really something to her to always help her to remember that she's not defined by her circumstance, right? But she has a definition that has already been established for her life, and she just needs to walk in that authentically. I got two that I can think about off the top of my head, are really three powerful books. I'm gonna give you guys three different. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen is always a really powerful one because it just talks about the power of your thought life. Another one is The One Thing. Really powerful. Gary Keller and I think it's Jay Papasan are the authors. It just talks about what's the one thing that you can do, such by doing that thing, everything else becomes easier or necessary. And I think the third one is Outwitting the Devil. That was one by Napoleon Hill. That was really good. Those are three books that I enjoyed a lot. And really, obviously, I think I've read The One Thing twice, and James Allen about, two times as well. So those are three that I personally recommend. I think they're really powerful.
Okay, so I'm going to go add them to my Audible. So I haven't read that one by Napoleon Hill, but I have read Think and Grow Rich, which is his classic. So yeah, I'm adding them to my Audible. It's happening.
You go.
Oh my goodness. So you have dropped so much gold, so much wisdom. I almost feel like it's been so much for people to take in, but I'm going to ask you one final question.
Sure.
So what are your top 3 tips for living an abundant life?
So good. Top 3 tips. Number 1, I think it's important to define what success means to you. Really understanding, what am I pursuing? What's important to me? What type of life do I want to live at the end of the day? It's in that definition that we begin to disconnect from pursuing a life that is not authentically what would fulfill us. So I think the first thing you ought to do is to define success. I think the second thing is to operate with an attitude of gratitude, not an attitude of entitlement. I think gratitude is the thing that really stretches our capacity and it postures us for possibility, right? When we have this attitude of gratitude, we begin to, I say this with it, an attitude of gratitude is not about celebrating the gifts in life, but about celebrating the greatest gift called life. And we have to understand that once we have life, we have a reminder that possibility is still possible. And the third thing I think, which is underestimated, but stop pursuing perfection. The pursuit of perfection really only produces one thing, and that's procrastination, right? And instead of pursuing perfection, I think we need to pursue excellence. So define success, operate with an attitude of gratitude, and pursue excellence. Excellence is about maximizing the input and measuring the outcome. Perfection is what we try to do, and we try to control the outcome, and so become paralyzed to the input. So those are my 3 things that I believe are really important when we talk about this concept of abundance, because you know what's powerful about this whole conversation, this podcast, everything that you're doing, it's really because as humans, we all have power within us, right? And what you're doing here is you're creating a safe space that allows us to display outwardly what we possess inwardly, right? And so when we understand that the bridge to your abundant life is actually something you hold the keys for, and you can really tap in and you can create something that you've never seen before. You don't have to be your history, and you can still leave a legacy. You can change the trajectory of your family's name, right? When you understand that you have that ability in you, but as I say, it's not you, it's in your hand. If I tell you that it's you, then you think it'll happen because you hope for it. But when I tell you it's in your hand, you understand it'll happen when you work for it. And so those are the pieces I think are so powerful. And I'm so honored to have the opportunity to just be on here and share with you and your community, and just love everything you're doing. I just want to continue to support you the best way that I can, for sure.
Yay. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad you came on. I feel like there's just so much gold in this episode. I'm going to go buy your book as soon as we get done. I'll definitely have the link in the show notes. So other
Sure.
than your book being on Amazon, where can people find you online?
Sure. Website is iamjovanglasgow.com. That's IamJovanglasgow.com. This is the same thing as my social media handles, Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff.
Yes, definitely follow him on Instagram. He is dropping gold. I love his videos.
Thank you. Honored.
I'm so glad that Jody connected us,
Yes.
just because I was like, yes, this is exactly what I need to hear.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. Keep empowering people. And I feel like we need more voices like you. So that's why when I saw that video, I'm like, I have to have him on the show, because I think that when we share our voice and we share our truth, it gives other people courage to share their voice and their truth as well. So I love everything that you're doing.
So good. I'm honored. Thank you so much. Keep rocking it.
Thank you. All right, M&Ms, until next time, be decadent. Thank you for tuning in to the Abundance Hack Show. I would love to hear from you. Leave your comments and questions, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our yummy episodes. Every time you leave a 5-star rating or review, I do my happy dance.